What is going on, everybody? We are back with another Hidden Falls Media Experience episode, and this one is going to be amazing for all of you artists, graphic designers out there, anybody that identifies as a creative. This is going to be the episode for you. Real fast, though, before we get into the episode, I want to remind everybody that we do not run ads on this show. It is entirely free for you to consume all of our amazing guest content. So please hit that subscribe button. Please leave a comment down below. Let us know how we're doing. If you resonated with the guest or one of those key nuggets that you pulled out of the episode, we would love to hear about it from you. Today, though, we have Mike the Machine in the house, and Mike is an incredible graphic designer. As one of the many things that Mike has done in his life, moving through the audiovisual world and then moving into a variety of other industries I'm going to let him get into. Mike, welcome to the show. We're super happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Why don't you give everybody a little bit of context so we can get them caught up real fast? We've known each other now for a little over a year, but I want to get everybody caught up to speed with who you are, what you do, and what that origin story looked like from being a little kid all the way up to where we're at today at the end of 2020.
So I guess like a lot of artistic people, I grew up drawing. My parents were good about encouraging, me to draw. I was, drawing like cartoon characters and things like that throughout my younger years. And then once I got into high school, I kind of got into skating, and art sort of took a back seat. But then oddly enough, graffiti sort of came into my life around that time. And that sort of kind of lit the fire on the artistic stuff again, just a whole different culture type of thing. So I ended up getting into that really heavily in about 90. I think it started popping up around 90 for me. And so I started doing graffiti from 91 all throughout the 90s. And then and towards the late 90s, I kind of discovered graphic design and started playing around with that. That sort of lit another fire to where, when I was younger and my mom was always telling me, you need to do something with your art. And I couldn't really wrap my head around what that would be. I was like, what am I going to do? Like draw comic strips for a newspaper or like sell paintings? Like it didn't make any sense. Like,
right.
And it also seemed like that kind of like rock star type of thing where like, you could be the best musician in the world and never, ever make it. And so even as a younger person, for some reason I had that in my head. I was like, I don't know how to make a living doing art. So then that's when I discovered graphic design and I enjoyed doing it. It made a lot of sense that could be a career. So in 98, I ended up going to Cal Arts and I studied design there, graduated in 2002 and started my motion graphics company and started doing motion design and animation for TV shows, directed some music videos, did some things like that. And then I did that. I still have that business, but I've sort of transitioned into another business. So I guess it was maybe 5 years ago. Well, I started getting burned out on that business longer than 5 years ago. And I started my, passion for graffiti sort of started coming back as I was burning out on this graphic design stuff. And I had gotten back into graffiti. I took a little break during school. It was so time consuming that I just didn't have much time for anything else. And then a few years after graduating, again, starting a business, I didn't really have much time for it. So I stepped away from graffiti for about 6 years. And I started getting back into that while I was building my career. And then as I was burning out pretty heavily on the motion graphics stuff, I started looking for opportunities to give back to the graffiti culture, because while a lot of people see it as destructive, and there are, of course, aspects of that to it, there's a lot more to it than You know, it's a longer conversation, but there's a lot to it. So what I wanted to do is create just a space for young people to kind of help channel their creative energies a little bit. And there wasn't much of a plan, and it wasn't like a crazy business model, but I opened this gallery and a community art studio in San Pedro, and that just evolved into another business. So it started off, you know, graffiti writers, they draw in black books. I mean, I have one sitting right here, you know, so like you carry them around, you bring them, some people bring them to art shows, and you get your, you know, artists to sign them and things like that. So I was like, we'll have like a black book table and let these kids come in and not really tell them what to do, but at the same time provide just another channel for them to express themselves in a safe, kind of legal way. And that just built on itself. You know, it was like they started asking like, oh, do you guys sell anything here? And I was like, well, maybe we should sell some stuff. And, you know, fast forward to where we are now, and now we have like an e-commerce business, and we have a few of our own original products, and we have several nonprofit programs built from that, from the community art studio. Now we have a thing called the mobile graffiti art. It's a modular wall system that we can just pop up places, and we do
Cool.
live painting events. And so,
Like,
you know, that's kind of where we ended
before we
up.
get further into it, where can people find you and check out all of this that you're talking about?
The best place to get in touch with us is at Machin Studio on Instagram, machinstudio.com on the website. And we're also at Machin Studio on TikTok. There's a lot of that TikTok is mainly dedicated to the quick educational videos. So you can check us out there also.
Love it. So let's fast forward. So you're surrounded by such a unique culture, one that's typically really hidden away from a lot of society, and that you think of as kind of that destructive area of art. But I think we've all come across it, especially like if you're sitting in your car watching a train go by, you've noticed some piece of art that doesn't look destructive, but is truly a work of art that's on this. And it's kind of that quick flash of a moment, right? You pass it in your car, and it's that quick flash of, oh, that was really incredible art. Where do you start to see those lines start to blur between this is a destructive path versus a true art form that lives and breathes inside of cities and really gives it its own unique flair?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's something that I've been consciously thinking about for quite a while. And I want to be sort of that kind of bridge between like regular folks and graffiti writers. So I work with people on the neighborhood councils, like within the neighborhoods that are probably dealing with graffiti issues, but at the same time, I want to stay true to the culture and not so much tell people, hey, don't do illegal graffiti. I don't encourage it, but I don't discourage it either. So like I fully understand both sides. So like I can see how, say, like the person that doesn't like graffiti, when they're driving down the street and they're like, I hate this shit. Like,
Yeah.
you know, these, you know, a lot of people think it's all gang stuff, and that's a whole nother topic. But, you know, I can see how they wouldn't like it. But then at the same time, I also have these kind of deeper thoughts about like, you know, when did we decide who owns all of this shit? And like, when did we decide who owns this land and who could put this building here? And then I can't decide, you know, that there's some movie billboard in my neighborhood. You know, there's all these kind of bigger conversations there. But as far as like, I got a little off track, but like as far as your conversation, or I mean your question, it's a hard one to distinguish, because there could be a masterpiece but done illegally, you know, and like you said on the trains, like none of that stuff is legal. The trains, there's there's kind of an understanding that maybe the train workers, as long as you don't cover their numbers or the reflectors or things on the train that obstruct their ability to identify like what's on that train.
Mm-hmm.
Supposedly they generally don't care, and I've heard interviews with different train people. So while it is illegal, I personally think like, look, it's just a train, you know, it's not like it's something super, I don't know, it's a tough thing to talk about, because like some people are so enthusiastic about trains, they think they're beautiful, and they probably don't like seeing graffiti on them. But I see it as just like, hey, it's just something that's bringing shit from one place to another. You know, we put some art on it. What's the harm in it? But then the other side is like, well, we don't really have the right to decide that we can just put our art on other people's shit, you know? So I don't know, it's a tough, it's probably a really long conversation, you know, to talk about that.
Yeah. What was it like growing up and moving through that massive sweep of graffiti across the United States, especially being out in the Southern California area where you are? You got to witness the rise of this really come forward. What was that like? And do you see any parallels to what's going on today with modern art?
I mean, there are some, I can't really speak too much about modern art because I've never really followed like mainstream art, or I don't know what you would even call it. I've mainly focused on commercial art and graffiti, and that's sort of where I have some people that are, you know, that are affiliates of mine that have gone on to do museum work and gallery shows and all this kind of things. And I actually, I own a gallery, so like I display people's work. But as far as like that art scene, I don't know that much about it. I don't know enough about it to really talk about it. But as far as like coming through I mean, obviously graffiti started a long time before. Like it supposedly started in the 60s in Philadelphia, and then you have like the New York scene. So I didn't see any of that stuff with the subways and everything. But as far as the LA scene, I came in probably like a decade after it really started hitting really hard, maybe less than a decade. The 90s in LA, it was a crazy time because number one, it was really popping off in a big way. So anybody that was old enough to have been around in the 90s in LA saw that graffiti started really hitting hard in the 90s. And then all these different things started popping up, like this thing called tag banging. It was like the bridge between graffiti and gangs. So like they were a graffiti crew, but they would actually like shoot people and stuff. So you were dealing with that. And then in the mid 90s, the Mexican mafia, they put what's called a green light out on graffiti writers. And that basically means that any gangs that are underneath their affiliation were basically ordered to shoot us, you know? So
Wow.
it was thinking back as a 47-year-old man, I was like, what the fuck was I thinking even doing it anymore? but you know, so we were getting chased out of neighborhoods by gangs and things like that. So it was it was a crazy thing that was happening. Now everything seems a lot more mellow. There's I don't know. I'm not really involved in that sort of street level stuff anymore. So I couldn't really speak on the climate in that regard between the gangs and the graffiti writers, but it seems now that there's a little more acceptance between sort of the mainstream and graffiti. So we have a little more leeway to say, go up to a business and say, look, I see your building's getting tagged all the time and you're having to go out and paint over it. What if we just did some really nice looking artwork type of graffiti, really colorful stuff, and then it'll solve that problem for you. So you could do that before, but nowadays it seems that bridge is a little shorter now.
Right. We're seeing a lot of that in Cincinnati, where a lot of murals are going up to help prevent a lot of that destruction of property while still adding and kind of contributing to the culture and this flavor of the city. So I see a lot of that from your perspective. Um, I mean, I see it from mine as a marketing move to where, I mean, what an incredible conversation piece to have right outside your business, right? Because people will come just to look at that piece of artwork and you're right there. So,
Yeah.
so from that perspective, I see it being a tremendous benefit, and it has the deterrent aspect like you were talking about. Are you seeing any type of big movement with a lot of businesses pairing up with artists or looking for that opportunity to see what type of collaboration can happen to either increase the business's awareness or to help provide a space for the artist to come and actually display larger pieces? And what does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of it going on a small scale, and then even on a larger scale. And there's been lawsuits because different companies. There's actually a couple people from my crew that have had their work show up in ad campaigns uh, without any permission, and so there
Oh,
was this debate where it's like, well, that guy did that illegally, so it's fair game.
hmm,
But my understanding is that even if it's illegal, when an artist makes a piece of art, they automatically have some rights to that. So
sure.
even if it's not meant to be there, um, so there's been a lot of issues in that regard. And you know, I've seen some crazy things, and I'm not going to say how I feel about this one way or the other, but um, you know, the last one that I saw happen, I was just sort of like, don't fuck with graffiti writers like that. Like, you're talking about people that are willing to do things that a lot of people aren't willing to do. So, this big company sort of stepped over that line, and they were trying to take a hard stance on it. But then next thing you know, you got these graffiti writers rallying and start getting fire extinguishers full of paint and defacing their buildings and stuff. Like, I mean,
Wow.
it's just, it was totally crazy. So you do see people using the culture, and then in that way, a lot of people call them culture vultures, and it's like, hey, you're just trying to jump onto our thing and not show us any respect and just use the
Sure.
word, which I don't agree with. I'm not going to say how I feel about the whole destructive thing, but the, you see it on a smaller scale as well, like in the things that you said. One, to control the vandalism stuff, but the conversation piece, I think, is a huge one, because you could get a lot of people taking selfies in front of your business now, and there's a whole bunch of different things. So there's yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I could just go on like a crazy long tangent about that. It's but there's definitely a lot of value on both sides. Like, graffiti writers can have a lot of opportunity to do work that's going to stay, because that's something that you have to struggle with. I mean, not a struggle, it's just part of it. Like, you put something somewhere illegally, you don't really have any control over how long it's going to stay there. Even if you do it legally, you still don't have really any control. But at the same time, you could put something um, with an understanding on a business, and most likely it's going to stay there for a long time. Or you'll have a wall that you have access to, that you can, as it starts to fade, or if somebody comes and tags on it or something, you now have an opportunity to do new work that's going to stay in the public space, untouched for a longer period of time.
Sure. I have one hard question for you, and then we'll wrap it up with an easy question. Do you think creativity is something that can be taught, or do you think it's something that you're born with?
Um, I actually read a book. I'm so bad at remembering where I got information from in books. Like, I wasn't much of a reader up until somewhat recently, but it was Mindset by Carol Dweck,
Yeah,
Carol S. Dweck.
amazing book.
Yeah, and it changed my perspective. I always thought that it was something you were born with, and I think you are born with some built-in talents, and I think that's kind of a normal thing, but I think you can be taught. After reading that book, really, it opened my eyes to, I think some people probably have to work harder than others, and that's probably the same for anything from sports to whatever, mechanics or any of that kind of stuff. I think you're probably born with some built-in talents, but I really believe that you can you can learn how to be creative if you work hard at it.
Awesome. I think so too. It's it's definitely a skill, I feel like, and that when you stop, yeah, you can definitely pick it back up again like you did. Like you took the time off, but you were still invested into other creative endeavors. So even though you stopped, you really didn't stop being creative, and you found a way to redirect that energy and that focus into somewhere else. And I see a lot of people that within my age group, I'm seeing a lot of really weird things. And by weird, it's normal for a lot of other people, but to me, it's really weird. They're settling down, they're having families, they're getting off track from the dreams and the vision that I remember having conversations with them about, that I'm going to go out there and do X, Y, and Z. And all these things started to get in their way, and that they've changed course from what they used to say was their end all be all. And that's totally okay. We all change with it. But it's interesting to see the people that stick with some level of creativity, and just how exponentially, how much they just grow just all the time because they're staying with something, versus the people that said that was truly who they are, and then time distracted them and pulled them away from that calling. So we have one more question for you. It's the question we've been asking everybody at the end of this show, which is, 2020 really kicked a lot of us in the nutsack. How do you plan on taking your business moving throughout the rest of this year? We're in November of 2020, just past the election. What does it look like for you and for your community moving through this time and into the next 2 to 3 years of your business? What does that look like for you?
I'll try to make this short, but 2020, I know that a lot of things happened, but it was probably one of the best years I've ever had. So, I mean, I'm not, I started listening to Andy Frisella's podcast, the MFCEO podcast, last year, and it really changed my perspective on things. And I give him a lot of the credit as far as when this thing hit. I was like, you know what, I'm going to come out, whatever happens with this, I'm going to come out better than I was. And, I started doubling down on my fitness, and I've generated the habit, or created the habit, of eating well, so that wasn't really an issue. But I also had made a decision before that whole thing hit, before 2020 came, to really double down on this graffiti based business. So I was already kind of on this path that this lockdown thing didn't really shake. But in terms of where I see my business going, I have different goals. I have a hard time with these kind of questions, actually, but I'm just going to keep pushing forward. I mean, I think 2020 was I don't want to sound insensitive, but like, I know a lot of people got sick and a lot of shit happened, and I do have sympathy or empathy. I mix those words up too, for that. But at the same time, I feel like I have been on this sort of mindset for a good long time, that all this adversity, or any kind of adversity, you're going to come out the other side stronger if you actually work at it. Like if you sit there and again, I have a hard time with this, because like I feel like it might sound insensitive for people that maybe lost loved ones during this thing, but even that, like, I have suffered some things, like, a friend of mine, a business partner, died this year. One of my dogs died. So like, there's a lot of things that totally suck. But at the same time, when we do come out the other side of this, there's a lot of people that are going to come out a lot stronger. And so that's mainly where I'm focusing. I don't really know if I can tell you like where the exact targets are, but I can tell you that I'm going to be way, way stronger 3 years from now than I am now. I mean, that's just the the goal for the rest of my life until, maybe until I'm like 90 and I'm like, all right, I've done enough growing up. I'm going to chill now, So I don't know if that even answered your question or
Yeah,
not.
it's all good. There's no right or wrong answer for it. I think we're all on our own path, and we each see progress and roadblocks in our own way, especially with what we do with them. And I think you're 100% right. Taking those adversities, taking those challenges, and using it to our advantage. I had Sean Douglas on the podcast last week, and we were talking about how a lot of life is like firing a bow, where you have that moment of tension where you feel like you're being pulled back, and then there's this hold, and all archers or riflemen take that breath, and then they release. And when you release, it's that moment of, oh my gosh, everything I've just spent the last 2 or 3, 5, 10, 50 years on is truly paying off in just extreme momentum and extreme accuracy. So I think you're right. I think even though it may not be super clear to where you're going, I think you're on the right path and the target's set. So Mike, one more time, where can people find you, and we'll wrap this thing up?
At Machin Studio on Instagram is probably the best place. And then on the website, Machin Studio, you can see a lot of the things that we do there. You could see our nonprofit work on communityartmachine.com, and then at Machin Studio on TikTok.
Awesome. If you need a dose of creativity, if you need just a little bit of a different perspective, go check out Mike's page. You won't be disappointed. Mike, thank you so much for being on. We'll make sure we drop all those links in the show